T2, the spinous process is going to be half a level lower than the transverse processes. For T3 through T10, the spinous process is going to be a full level lower than the transverse process.
Can you repeat that one more time?
Yep. So T1 and T2, the spinous process is going to be half a level lower than the transverse process for that same segment. T3 through T10, the spinous process is going to be a full level lower. When we get down to T11 and T12, it's going to go back to being a half level lower. So that it's always the spinous process that's lower than the transverse process. And T1, T2, it's half. T3 through T10, it's full. T11 and 12, it's half again. And when we get to the lumbar spine, the transverse process is going to line up with the spinous process again. So for cervical and lumbar, they line up with one another. It's the thoracic spine where they get a little wonky. Okay, there are a couple of landmarks that can help you figure out at least generally where you are. The spine of the scapula will typically get us at T3, T4, meaning it'll get us to the spinous process of T3 and the transverse process of T4. Okay? The inferior angle of the scapula will get us to T7, T8. So the spinous process of T7 and the transverse process of T8. If you put your hands on the iliac crest and come across, that will generally get you to the L4, L5 inner space.
Can you repeat that one more?
Yep. When you put your hands on the person's iliac crest posteriorly, that's going to get you to that L4, L5 inner space. When you put your hands and you come across and you're on a spinous process, you're probably on L4. Okay, so you'll have to go down for L5. But if you come over and you're in a gap, whoa! Oh, that's not good. He always his second arm. Poor guy. Now he can't hit me. So those are just a general way to know where the segments are. The other thing that you can use as a landmark is we have 12 vertebral segments in the thoracic spine and we have 12 ribs. So we're going to be, you can, if the segment has a rib coming off of it, then that's still the thoracic spine. Okay? Now there are a couple of things with the ribs we need to be able to palpate. One is the rib angle. And the rib angle is the highest part of the ribs posteriorly. Now, if you look at those ribs, they really swoop down, okay? So if you need to find out which rib is not moving well, you're going to have to follow it up and then count that segment. Okay. Now 11 and 12 are our floating ribs. Okay. And 12 is very, very short. Margaret, do you mind if I find your... Somebody have you lie on your stomach, please? Okay. Your feet hanging off the table.
Put my face on that.
And, yeah, thank you. Perfect. Okay, so I found her iliac crest. I can come across. That's going to be her L4, so I can go down in there's her L5. But if I'm trying to find her floating ribs, I find her iliac crest and then I come up. Okay, now here I can wrap. This is T11 or rib 11. I'm on the pokey part. Okay, so now I'm going to follow 11 back, and 12 is going to be pretty short. and it's right there. Okay? So that's how you're going to find 11 and 12. 10 is going to be the last rib that goes all the way around. Okay? So 11 is going to be, the tip of 11 can be fairly lateral. The end of T12 is going to be pretty close. Now the other thing, when we talked about palpating the transverse processes, in the cervical spine, they're pretty close to the spine itself. When we get down into the thoracic spine, they're going to be further apart. And when we get into the lumbar spine, they're going to be even further apart. Now, what I would recommend doing is palpate where it has a very flat upper thoracic spine, right? So it would be interesting to know what's going on there. So I'm going to again find my fingers and I'm going to leave them on structures I know, okay? Now, if you've already marked C7 from when she was sitting, that's a great landmark to count down from. Now, those landmarks I gave you about T3, T4, and T7, T8 only work if the person's arms are at their side. If the arms are up like this, that's going to cause the scapula to abduct and to rotate, okay? Then if I need to go to low thoracic, I'm going to start at L4 and work my way up, okay? But I'm going to find a spinous process, and let's say that this is 8. What would be the transverse process on either side of 8? 9. Okay? So I would still, just as you did in the cervical spine, find the spinous process first, and then find the transverse processes. Now the transverse processes in the thoracic spine, in some of you, will be relatively easy. In the lumbar spine, they're going to be pretty deep. This is one of the few places where it's okay to palpate with your thumbs, because you're going to be looking for symmetry, okay? Is one thumb more posterior than the other? For those of you who have flexible fingers, make sure you're not palpating like this, and that you have your knuckles in a neutral position, okay? All right, just like that. We've now talked about how old I am. Even now, if I'm palpating someone's back, I am writing on them. I've gotten permission, but I'm making marks on their back. I have a whole road map. Because what I don't want to do is find out that she has a dysfunction here, 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 and here. For example, that wouldn't be that unusual. And then have to try to count every single time. As long as I've got marks, then, and I know that that was T4, well, now I can just count down from T4 instead of having to start back up at C7 again or start up from L4. So after I'm done with the back eval, there's a good chance there's going to be a fair amount of writing on that person's back. Okay. Now I would never do that without permission, but that way I can keep things straight. And if I've got a segment where the transverse process is more posterior, I put an X on that one because I know that that's more posterior. And if it happens in flexion or extension, I would write an F or an E, but that's beyond today. Okay. All right. Did I miss anything for ribs?
7, 8, you just count, right?
Well, 7 and 8 are the what's called the true ribs. So, but 10 is still going to go all the way around because it has that cartilaginous connection. All right. Let's hold off on pelvis probably. We'll do that in a bit. Okay.